Hi everyone, welcome to my channel if you're new here. Welcome back to my channel if you're trying to be a subscriber. I bet you didn't think this video was actually coming, but it is, because I filmed one of these for every single month of the year so far, and I'm not about to stop now. I really want to have one for every single month. So yes, today's video is going to be my September, almost for the month, wrap up, talking you through the 4 books that I managed to get through in September. It was not my best reading month. I was quite heavily in a slump for a good majority of it, and that's really sucked, and I feel like I'm still a little bit in that. I don't think I'm going to get out of it until I finish my current reads, but we're chipping away at the ice block and it's going to happen eventually. So I had quite a mixed reading month. I had one very good book, and then a couple of bad ones, and then one kind of middling one. Yeah, let's get into the video. So the first book that I read was my favourite of the month, and this was Fourth Wing by Yarros. It's no surprise to anyone that I kind of enjoyed this, because this book has absolutely blown up over the internet over the past few months since it came out. I believe it was released in May. By the time I finally got this book, it felt like it had been out for years, because I just felt so much FOMO over not having read it. Fourth Wing was a beautiful birthday gift from my friend Lucy from the channel Library of Lucy, or I think she goes by Lucy Rose now. I'll have her channel linked, of course, and we actually decided to buddy read the book together, and that was such a good experience, so fun, because there's so many little like Easter eggs throughout this book that kind of hint towards the plot. I did actually film an entire reading vlog which is about this, reading it from start to finish, and that's in the video that's called Amazon Picks What Book I Read. So much fun. I really enjoyed making that vlog and reading it with Lucy. The whole experience was wonderful, and I think it really did add to like my rating of the book. So Fourth Wing follows Violet. There's different kind of quadrants you can study in this world as like a college age student. So Violet studies in the scribe one, and that's all she's wanted to do. She's wanted to be a scribe. She's surrounded by books and she loves books. You definitely see that kind of like love for books and knowledge and everything like that. She definitely gives kind of Ravenclaw vibes, except the fact that Violet's mother is the general of this place called Basgiath War College, which is the kind of school that oversees the scribes and everything like that. But within this school you can also be a dragon rider. Violet's mum is like, no child of mine will be a scribe, you have to be a rider. So Violet is thrust into this kind of like Hunger Games-esque competition, which is very brutal, kind of life or death. Unlike every other student, she doesn't have the previous training because she's been preparing to be a scribe all of her life. The other people she's up against are very bloodthirsty and very intent on becoming riders themselves. So she's competing against people who are completely out of her league. And Violet actually lives with a chronic illness, and the chronic illness is to do with weak bones and ligaments and things like that. It's not actually kind of specified what she has necessarily, but it's something that the author actually has and voices rep on that. So Violet's at even more of a disadvantage, but you kind of see how she uses her mind and various tricks and things like that in order to stay on top. Her mental strength is incredible, and that's something that I really enjoyed reading about in this book. This book is a romantasy, so there is quite a heavy kind of like romance subplot, but actually I would say, in my opinion, that the fantasy does take the forefront of the story. The romance definitely comes into play towards the end, but for the most part it is just Violet's trying to survive going to the school with this terrible mother who pretty much doesn't care about her existence. It was so fun to read an epic fantasy. I haven't done so for a very long time, and this just was amazing. This is a new adult book, so it is kind of hard to wrap your head around. I wouldn't recommend this as like kind of the first fantasy you get into. I would also say that this book heavily relies on kind of the tropes already established within fantasy and dystopian, so particularly like the Hunger Games, Divergent, that kind of thing, but also lots of influences from Avatar, which was probably a little criticism I did have with this book. I really liked the characters, but I didn't love them. I was not completely connected with them, definitely not as much as I was with the Avatar series, although having said that, that series is kind of like a 6-star read for me. And so overall I gave this book a 5-star. I loved it so much, but if you've seen my video where I rank all the books I've given 5 stars to, you would know that this one actually kind of fell to the bottom of that pile, and that's because in reality this is probably more of a 4.75 than it is a 5. But I don't rate in 0.25s. This book is definitely more of a 5 than it is a 4.5, so I decided to just round it up and go with a 5. But that's Fourth Wing. I had so much fun with this, and it definitely kind of like rose my expectations for what other reads I had throughout the month, and I feel like this could have been why I did go into a little bit of a slump, but we'll get into that in a second. What I will say though is that the sequel for this book comes out in November. I'm so excited to read it. I don't know when I'm going to pick it up, but yeah, I can't wait. There was an amazing cliffhanger at the end. It was so much fun. But yeah, definitely recommend checking out the vlog if you want to hear more of my thoughts on Fourth Wing. And on a completely different note, like so polar opposite, I read Nadja by André Breton. This is a French translated modern classic. The translation was by, let's see, we need to give him credit, Richard Howard. This book is a trip. It is so bizarre, but yeah. So basically we're following our main character, and he is André Breton. So this is kind of like this fusion of fiction and non-fiction. We kind of don't know how much of this is real and how much of it isn't. But he's just living his life, going about his life, flexing how many famous people he knows within Paris. I know, it's one of those. One day, quite like well into this novel, whatever this is, he meets this woman called Nadja. It's about his kind of like absolute kind of fascination and dedication towards this woman, but also all of the mixed feelings he has towards her, how he kind of idolizes her, but also he's also so disparaging of her in so many ways. But she's this kind of enigmatic figure, definitely like the absolute kind of crux of the manic pixie dream girl trope. The whole idea of this book is it's a piece of surrealist fiction. We don't actually know whether Nadja is real or whether Nadja is just a representation of something within André Breton's life. For the most part, I found this book incredibly boring. It was so confusing, but not in a way that classics are like, and like I don't even think I could do research into this book and that it would become much more clear for me. I also didn't love how the protagonist viewed Nadja. I felt like that was a little bit icky, and it is just that like launch into the manic pixie dream girl thing. Sometimes that trope is kind of portrayed in a less direct way, and I do sometimes enjoy that, like in Breakfast at Tiffany's. Holly Golightly is a little bit like that. On the whole, this was a little bit weird, and like some of the lines, like he was just so rude to this woman, so judgmental of her. The other day I did actually go through this book and I put in my tabs because I had underlined but I hadn't put tabs in just because I hadn't got around to it. Pretty much all of these beautiful lines are so incredible. It just like, it blew my mind. Like I was like, maybe this book deserves more than I gave it. It was kind of just like confusion, swirling, massive surrealist ideas, and then like one stark line that was so beautiful and I really loved. So maybe we'll read a couple of those if you want to get interested. So of course the first line is iconic. Who am I? If this once I were to rely on a proverb, then perhaps everything would amount to knowing whom I haunt. A way of transforming gossamer into spiderweb, that is, into what would be the most shimmering, delicate thing in the world were it not for the spider in the corner. Life is other than what one writes. Don't I love her? When I'm near her, I am nearer things which are near her. With the end of my breath, which is the beginning of yours. And then the last line is also absolutely iconic, and that is, beauty will be convulsive or it will not be at all. So this was a very mixed bag. I think I would enjoy watching like a video essay on this book, reading more into it a little bit. I want to explore what I didn't get, particularly because I feel like I'm not as familiar with the surrealism movement as I should be in order to like fully appreciate this book. I also am not mad that I tabbed it. I think that I'll definitely end up rereading this again at some point in my life, many years down the line, God willing. Hope to better understand it, maybe if I do some more research beforehand. And also I haven't read the introduction to this book because usually Penguin's introductions tend to spoil the plot, so I decided to skip it, but on my reread I will definitely read that. One thing I will say is that I bought this book in Shakespeare & Company in Paris, and so it has the beautiful stamp in there which you can optionally get, and it's also one of the most beautiful colours in my opinion. That's Nadja. Strange book. 2.5 stars. I just felt like if I was going to give it any rating, that's the one that best fit it. I apologise about the lighting. I think it's going to pour. Quickly, I want to mention that I also began the audiobook for Dracula this month. Dracula is the absolutely iconic classic book by Bram Stoker about the vampire Dracula, and yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with that. It's very atmospheric and spooky. I was reading it on audiobook. I got about 7% of the way through, and then my brother actually gifted me a physical copy of the book. So I'm considering temporarily DNFing it so I can read it physically at a later date, but I'm not entirely sure what's going on with that. That did take up a little part of my month, and it kind of became a little bit of a fascination for me, so that's something I just want to quickly mention. But now we shall move on to Twisted Games by Anna Huang. So different from Nadja, so different from Dracula. I just saw something at the corner of my eye and I was convinced it was a spider. My heart is like hammering. Twisted Games by Anna Huang. Okay, so if you have watched my January wrap up, you would know that I read Twisted Love at the beginning of the year. I gave it 2.5 stars. It was not good. These books are contemporary romance novels and they're insane, basically. Anna Huang kind of has a recipe, and I found that this book did kind of completely follow that. The first book was bad, but it was bad in a way that was just like so ridiculous that I actually almost had like a little bit of respect for it, because I was like, this book is just unashamedly what it is. You either love it or you hate it. I personally hated it, but 2.5 stars, like, it's fine. It was like a bad fun time. Twisted Games, on the other hand, actually had a plot line and a kind of rational, no, I would say rational, but this book was literally set in a made-up European country, which the MFC was the princess of. So there's that. This is a bodyguard romance with her bodyguard. It just quickly spirals, basically. Okay, let's go through what I enjoyed about this book. I really liked that this book was more than just the romance. There's definitely a bigger story going on here, and I really liked how that kind of unfolded. People also complain that there are quite a lot of time jumps in this book, but I actually didn't mind those. They were okay. They kind of actually made the book a little bit more believable, because it wasn't just like, well, there was an element of insta love, but the characters also had about 3 years over which they could learn to kind of love each other, so that when the final love confession came out, it was not like, where did this come from? Something I do want to say is that Anna Huang's MMCs are just tragic. Like, I would not want these men within like 50 feet of me. They are so possessive and controlling and kind of aggressive as well, and it's just like, but the thing that bothers me the most is definitely the possessiveness. It's so dominating. That's what the entire book turns into. So when the male grand character is like, I love you, you're everything to me, I'm like, oh, that's really sweet, but then he's like, I'll kill any other guy who goes near you. I'm just like, no, that's not attractive. The spice scenes, immediately no. I'm reading a Kindle fantasy romance at the moment, and the spice scenes in that are just so far superior to this. These are just gross, and there's too many of them. I know that is something that's up to like personal preference. I don't mind reading about spice, it does bore me a little bit, but I can just like skip over it, whatever. But this was just like every 2 pages we were having a scene or like alluding to that in some way. And this book is not short. This book is over 400 pages, so you can imagine how much of that there is. So like I said, I respected Twisted Love more. It kind of just like was what it was, whereas I felt this book was trying to take itself more seriously, which in some ways I liked, and in some ways I thought was kind of like the downfall. And by the end I just wanted it to be over. So I actually ended up giving this one 2 stars, which is such a shame because obviously Twisted Love was 2.5 and this was 2 stars, and I really did think that I was going to have more luck with this book. This is the second book in a 4-part series of companion novels. All the character storylines do kind of overlap, but I will say now that it would be an absolute miracle if I decided to go out and purchase and then read books 3 and 4 of the Twisted series. I think I'm done for now. That was another buddy read. Being able to rant to the person I was buddy reading it with was the only thing that kind of made it most minuscule bit bearable. So after those 2 reads, I had Nadja, which was like confusing and also for the most part quite unenjoyable despite the odd one-liner, and then Twisted Games, which was just absolutely tragic. Probably deserves the lower rating than that. I feel like 2 stars is a bit generous. I was struggling. I'd had the absolute peak that was Fourth Wing, and then we dipped into this trough, and I was struggling to make it up the other side of the valley. But because I hadn't read many books and it was towards the end of the month, I decided to film a video where I basically let a random wheel generator pick how many pages I had to read per day for a week. I decided to kind of like scrap my current reads and pick up something completely new. And one of the books that I eventually chose for that was The Lover by Marguerite. So what I didn't know before going into this book was that this is actually a memoir, and the back actually kind of sells this like it's fiction and also like it's a romance. Not a romance, but like a love story. This is definitely not that. This is the story of Duras, and it's about a relationship that she had in her youth. She was a little French girl and she was living in a French neighborhood within Saigon, and she came from a very poor family. Her father had just passed away and her mother was extremely dysfunctional. She had a younger brother and she had an older brother, and the older brother treated her and her family very badly. He was very manipulative, almost in a way that makes me think he could be a little bit narcissistic, or I don't know, it felt like he had some sort of personality disorder. To make ends meet, Duras gets in a relationship with a much older Chinese man. That's kind of what this book focuses on. So at the time, I believe she is 15 when this relationship starts, and the man, I believe, is in his late 20s. So this is obviously an illegal relationship. It's conducted in secret, and I mentioned this in the video where I read this book, but one of the reviews I read for it said that this book was like Lolita if Lolita was told from Dolores's perspective, and Dolores is Lolita. So as you can imagine, parts of this were quite difficult to read when I clued into the fact of what was happening, and then also when I remembered that this is a true story. This is something that happened in real life, obviously at a much earlier time than one I'm in, but still it was quite haunting, particularly this quote on the back that says, "Very early in my life it was too late." It's so heartbreaking. It is only a short little book, but it's definitely one that I couldn't rush through and I had to take my time with. It's sold in a very kind of fragmented way that kind of fits the context of the novel. I'm gonna say novel because there is something a little bit kind of like dreamlike to it that makes it feel less non-fiction. I think because this account was written by the author much later date in her life, so she was looking back on it kind of retrospectively. If you didn't know this already, this is an award-winning novel, particularly within French literature. Well, I think it was very important that Duras wrote her story, and it's amazing the reception it got with the amount of people this book has and will still fall into the hands of. I do wonder why it is such like the success it was in the way that it was, because it's described as perfect, an exquisite jewel of a novel, a brilliant work of art, as multifaceted as a diamond, as seamless and polished as a pearl. Not really what I managed to gather from it. I felt like this was, I'm gonna use that word again, but haunting, and also told in a kind of experimental way, but I did think that its merits did stop at a point. It could have been that something was lost in translation. Like I said, this was translated from the French by Barbara Bray. I'm not sure. It also has an introduction which I should go back and read because of the same reason as Nadia, like I didn't want to spoil myself in advance. And again, I would like to research it further. I love the cover of this book. I love some of the quotes in it. They're really beautiful and really interesting, kind of caused me to pause, but I'm not sure whether kind of long term I will end up keeping this one. But overall I gave it a 3.5 stars. This is something I kind of explored in the vlog that I filmed. I feel like you have to look at memoirs in the same way as you would look at like a piece of fiction, in terms of like its value and also its like purpose to a reader, not for the author, you know. But there you go, there you have it. Those are the 4 books that I managed to read in the month of September. Very mixed reading month, full of very different genres. Fourth Wing, Nadja, Twisted Games, and The Lover. I do love this colour palette. Look at this. We've got some absolutely amazing golds and beiges. Beautiful. I did a little reel and I'm thinking I'm going to do an Instagram post. This colour palette was unintentional, but somehow turned out to be very special. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up because that's how I can tell you you did. I post videos every Wednesday and Saturday, so I'll see you super soon in a couple of days for another one. Bye bye.